Freeze Ray, Freeze Ray, Freeze Ray is exactly what Despicable Me 4 did to every other movie this weekend. I'm Adam. This is Does It Hold Up Box Office Edition, where we go over what were the top 10 movies at the box office this past weekend. We take a look at some other charts, like the top 10 movies of 2024, and then at the end of the show, we flash back to some old movies to see how well they did during their release. Normally, we only have one movie during that portion, but this week, we have two, because I wanted to do a little bit of a comparison. But as always, let's go ahead and start with what were the top 10 movies at the box office this past weekend. In first place is Despicable Me 4, the new animated film from Illumination starring Gru and those lovable minions. Despicable Me 4 was new to theaters this weekend, and it brought in just over $75 million. But as you can see, its total box office so far here domestically, meaning the United States and Canada, is $122.6 million. And you're probably asking, what's the difference? Why is that so separated? Well, if you take a look at that little note there, it's because Despicable Me 4 actually opened on Wednesday, July 3rd, because it wanted to be available for the holiday, July 4th, and so it brought in a bunch of money, about $50 million, before the weekend even happened. So imagine if it didn't open on Wednesday, how much more money it would have brought in. Just absolutely crazy. In second place in its fourth week is Inside Out 2 with another $30.3 million, a 47% drop versus last week. But it doesn't matter. Who cares? It's made $534.1 million so far. Insane. In third place is A Quiet Place Day 1 in its second weekend with another $20.6 million, a 61% drop. It's just under $94 million domestically. It will definitely, if it hasn't already by the time you see this, cross that $100 million mark. In fourth place is another new movie to the list. It's Maxine, the third movie in Ty West trilogy about Maxine / Pearl / I don't know. It took in $6.7 million, and that's where it sits so far domestically. In fifth place is Bad Boys Ride or Die in its fifth week with another $6.6 million, a 36% drop, and it's made $177.4 overall. Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1 falls to sixth place this week in just its second week with $5.3 million, a decent hold of 51%. I know that sounds really weird to be like, but normally that's a bad hold and you're saying it's decent. Well, I expected this movie to probably fall off a lot more, just as much as other people did. It only opened up to $11 million. Not great. Figured it was going to fall at least 60+% this week. So to hold only 51 shows maybe that crowd's going to be checking out here to weeks 2, 3, 4, and on. It's brought in $22 million here domestically so far. In seventh place is another movie new to the list. It's The Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. This is just one of those feel-good movies, which usually brings people out that first week and then it slowly disappears. It brought in just over $3 million, but it did open early last week, so its grand total so far is $6.6 million. Kalki 2898 AD in its second week stays here in the top 10 with another $1.8 million, but a 65% drop, and it's $16.5 million domestic so far. In ninth place is The Bike Riders in its third week with another 1.3-ish million, 61% drop, just over $19.3 million. Huge disappointment. That is a massive drop for a movie in its third week. Usually week 3, you can see holds around 35 to 45%. So to see 61 now, that's a first to second weekend drop, not a second to third weekend. Nobody's going to check this movie out, which apparently is a really big shame. It's a pretty good movie. Hopefully more people check it out, either in theaters or when it comes to streaming. And in 10th place, in its 10th week, jumping back into the list, is The Fall Guy with $870.9 thousand, a 129% increase over last week, and it's made $92.1 million so far. It jumped back into the top 10 because it actually added a few theaters over this last weekend, which allowed it to kind of, I don't know, get some more word of mouth maybe in areas that it hadn't yet. Something else that's really interesting about theater changes this past week is Inside Out 2 still came in second place with that $30 million, and it actually lost 680 theaters this past weekend. That's a massive drop. Where did those screens go? Well, to Despicable Me 4. Imagine if Inside Out 2 had not lost that many theaters. Where would it actually be at? So next week, depending on if it gets some of those theaters back, I expect it to not fall that much going into its 5th week. Let's go ahead and take a look at the movies that fell out of the top 10 this past weekend. We had 4 movies. The first was Jet and Juliet 3 after just 1 week. Kinds of Kindness jumped into the charts in its 2nd week, but then fell out here in its 3rd week. But it's going to remind me a lot, or will remind me a lot most likely, of Poor Things that was coming in and out of the top 10 as it spread to more and more theaters and word of mouth started growing. The Garfield movie falls out after 6 weeks and barely made a dent in the box office, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes falls out after 8 weeks. So what do we do now after we take a look at the top 10 movies? We take a look at a comparison chart comparing each weekend from 2023 to the same weekend in 2024. This past weekend, July 5th through July 7th, was the 27th weekend of the year. So let's take a look at how those 2 weekends are competing. Back in 2023, the new release was Insidious: The Red Door, and it led the way to $130.3 million total at the domestic box office, which was a small step up from the 26th weekend of the year, but still not a great number. Here in 2024, this past weekend, Despicable Me 4 led the way to a total box office of $156.1 million, which again is a small increase over last weekend, just like 2023, but we are still leading the way. That now makes 4 consecutive weekends that 2024 has outpaced 2023, but overall we're still very far behind, and we have that massive big hitter coming very soon in Barbie. And nothing is currently on the schedule this summer that can compete. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the top 10 movies of 2024 so far. We had a new one to the chart, and we had a little bit of movement, but nothing too crazy. The number 1 movie is going to be no surprise to anybody watching this show or anybody who knows anything about the box office. Inside Out 2 with that $534 million is leading the way. Dune Part 2 with $282 million in 2nd place. Godzilla Kong with $196 million in 3rd. Kung Fu Panda 4 is in 4th with $193.5 million. But Bad Boys Ride or Die actually moves up 1 spot to jump into 5th place with $177.4 million. Is it going to reach Kung Fu Panda 4 is now the question. Does it have enough left in the tank to get it into 4th place? I don't think so, but stranger things have happened. Since Bad Boys Ride or Die jumped into 5th place, it means Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes falls 1 spot to 6th with their $169.6 million. In 7th place, after just 1 weekend and not even a full week in theaters yet, Despicable Me 4 jumps onto the list with $122.6 million. That's rather impressive. The only other movie we've really seen do that this year was Inside Out 2, jumping in after just its 1st week. In 8th place is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, falling 1 spot with $113 million. If also falls 1 spot to 9th with $110.8 million. And here we go. Bob Marley One Love is still holding on to a spot in the top 10 movies of the year with that $96.9 million. 1 movie fell off this list this past week, and that was, sadly, The Fall Guy. Okay, this is where we talk about an old movie from the past. We flash back to see how well it did in theaters. Was it profitable, or did it lose the studio money? And like I said at the beginning of the show, I actually have two charts this week so that we can kind of look at how animation should be handled. The first one we're going to look at is Despicable Me, from all the way back in 2010. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's been 14 years since this movie came out. It was a really big movie when it was in theaters, but how profitable or not profitable was it? Let's go ahead and take a look. Domestic week 1. The movie brought in $85.6 million. Studios kept 60% of that, which means $51 million went into their pockets. Domestic week 2, another $52 million. Studio kept 55%, so $28.5 million went in their pockets. The rest of the domestic run for this movie brought in $115 million. Studios kept 50% of that, so $57.5 million. Internationally, massive hit for this movie. $292 million, but studios only got to keep, just a little baby portion of that, a whole 40%. So $116.7 million came back to them. There was no Chinese release. In fact, there's a lot of controversy about Despicable Me 1 and Despicable Me 2 because there were theories that it was banned in China due to the word minions. I mean, I don't really like them that much either, so if you don't want to watch them, I completely understand. The budget for this movie was $69 million only. And that's going to be important when we look at the next chart. Marketing for this movie, they did a really big push, working with a lot of places to kind of get the minion face out there as much as possible. So the marketing budget was roughly $80 million. The gross for the movie, $544.7 worldwide. Net $254.3 million, which means Despicable Me made an estimated profit of $105.3 million in just its theatrical run. That's not including ancillary markets like video games and toys, comic books, everything else that they did, which we know Minions was a huge hit because of this movie. They literally made a part of a theme park about these characters. So they have just been raking in the money since this movie first released 14 years ago. The next movie we're going to take a look at should be no surprise. A couple of weeks ago, I toyed around with looking at the original Inside Out to see how profitable it was, but I thought, nah, I'm not a big fan of the movie. I'd rather not talk about it as much as possible. But then the opportunity presented itself this week to do a little bit of a comparison with Despicable Me 4, which is a completely different studio. So let's go ahead and take a look at Inside Out from 2015. Domestic week 1, the movie brought in $132.8 million. Studios got to keep about $79.7 million. Domestic week 2, another $83 million in theaters. Studios kept 45 of that. Domestic week 3 plus $140 million for the movie. Studios kept 70. Internationally, an even bigger hit. It brought in $493.8 million internationally. Studios kept that 40%, which gave them a nice tidy sum of $197.5 million. That's crazy. It did get a Chinese release. It brought in around $15 million. Studios kept 22.5%, just over $3 million. But here's where it gets tricky. The budget for this movie was $175 million. And by all estimates, they spent the same amount on marketing. There's actually reports and rumors out there that it's possible the marketing went to about $200 million, but we'll keep it at just $175 for here. That means they spent $350 million to make and market this movie. The worldwide gross was $865.6 million. It netted $396.6 million. But remember, it spent $350 million to make and market the movie. So yes, it was still profitable. It made an estimated profit of $46.6 million. But when you grossed almost $1 billion worldwide and you could only pocket $46.6 million, that seems like a really big problem. Especially when we go back and we take a look at Despicable Me, where it only had a budget of $69 million and an $80 million marketing budget. That's only 149 million. Imagine if Pixar had done that. If they found a way to keep their budget lower, how much money this could actually make. And I gotta be honest with you, Despicable Me is a better movie than Inside Out. It just is. I understand that they're kind of different, but when I sit down at the end of the day, if you tell me I gotta pick one of these to watch, I'm gonna watch Despicable Me 4. It launched an entire franchise. It launched a theme park. It launched spin offs, all this other stuff. And they made it for so much cheaper than Pixar did for Inside Out. And Inside Out, although it just got a sequel that's doing extremely well and tons of ancillary markets and toys and stuff like that, I don't think it has the worldwide appeal that maybe the Minions do. So, Pixar, yes, you made some money, Disney, on this movie, but just imagine if you would have kept the budget a little bit lower. Yes, it's an animated movie. Yes, the budgets are going to be a little bit higher, but even Despicable Me 4 that just came out this year has a reported budget of about $100 million, whereas Inside Out 2's reported budget is about $200 million. Every penny counts, and they're making a profit still, but I'm betting they'd like to make a lot more. And I just don't understand why they're spending double the amount as this other studio to make similar quality products. That's all I'm saying. All right, that's it for the box office this week. Thank you for joining me to take a look at the top 10 movies and flash back to 2 animated movies that kind of changed the game. I'll be back again on Tuesday with another box office roundup. Later this week, we'll have maybe a new video coming, so make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that stuff so you don't miss when we drop new videos. And until I see you next time, just remember to be good to yourself, be kind to others, and as always, keep watching movies.